Hi everyone, and Happy New Year, and welcome to 2021. In this video, we're going to look at what's new in this New Year's Day release, that is the 2021-01-01 release. We're not going to look at all the changes, but we are going to look at some of the main modifications and changes in this particular release. So the first one I want to talk about is the modifications that were made to the iTool interface so that it now supports non-modal forms. So previously, if you opened a particular tool, you couldn't get control back to the main ramp GUI unless you had closed the tool down. That's fine for some tools, but for other tools, for example, the raster calculator and the tabular calculators, it was a little bit annoying. So now they support non-modal forms, which means that I can go back and I can continue working within my within the ramp GUI, and then when I want to return to the raster calculator, I can. It also means that when I click calculate, it will perform the calculation, add the results into the raster layer listing, and still be available for you to modify things, whereas previously it shut down. So that's one of the main changes to tools, and specifically we've implemented these non-modal forms in the raster calculator and the tabular calculator. So whilst we're on that, you may have noticed that the raster calculator has changed somewhat in terms of its user interface. So let me explain to you what's changed and why it's a little bit more usable now. I'm just going to add a data set to use as an example, and I'll open the raster calculator again. So now in the raster calculator, when I declare variables, I right click here, add, click the raster, and I can define it as being float or kernel with a certain kernel size. That was a little clunkier before, but you'll also notice that it automatically now adds that to the signature of the calculate function. And if you've defined a kernel, like I have now, it also then exposes the methods and properties that you can access from kernel. So if, for example, I'll change this to my raster is the name of the raster, you'll notice that it's changed here in the signature or the arguments to the calculate function. And if I come down here, I can now double click on this, and it inserts my raster.max raster value. So the same is true if I want to access a particular item in a kernel. So if I access an item, it now allows me to access the kernel item properties. So I'm going to get an item at a particular row and column, and then I'm going to return the raster value for that. And all I need to do is put the specific row or column in here, and I'm ready to go. So this is much easier than previously, where you had to be familiar with the kernel object and the kernel item objects and their properties and refer back to the documentation and that sort of thing. The other thing that's changed in here is that if I now save, let's for example save this particular kernel, so I'm going to save it to test.cs, and I'm going to close it down and open up the raster calculator again. If I open test.cs now, you'll notice, this still illustrates my point, you'll notice that it now persists the names of the variables that are being used, and as soon as I assign them to a raster, it again inserts them as arguments in there. So it also persists the type. So if I have a kernel, if I defined the mean as a kernel with a 9x9 kernel, then and save this, next time I open it, it will remember that. So that is also a very useful change. It means that you can define functions. When you open them again, it will basically be set up for you to just simply pick the rasters that you want to choose for that particular for this particular function. So these are big improvements, I think, to the raster calculator, and they certainly make raster calculations much easier than they were before. We've made similar changes to the tabular data calculator. Now when you open the tabular data calculator, let's get some sample data. Let's pick POS. It will now list all of the available fields. So you pick your inputs, you would pick your output in here, but it lists all the available fields so that if I'm doing sequential processing and I now define double latitude, once it's recognized that that variable exists as a field name, it highlights it in bold. Similarly, if I have something that doesn't exist in there, let's say string val, it tells me, hang on, you've defined a variable up here, and it doesn't actually exist in the data set. So that's a big change that we've made, and again, it makes the tabular data calculator more usable. For in-memory processing, yeah, not much has changed it here. It just simply lists the available fields and their column reference numbers so that you can use them in here. So other things that have changed, if I go back now and look at the about information for this particular raster, you'll notice that previously it had kurtosis, but we've added skewness in there as well. And skewness is also a statistic that is now available via the local statistics processor as well. So you can now calculate the skewness of a distribution for an entire data set, or indeed for a specific localized neighborhood. In the workflow system, I can now, when I export to C#, previously I could create a new project or update a new project. Now I can also choose to just compile the project separately, whereas before you would need to rebuild the project for, say, Visual Studio or execute the compiler at the command line. That's no longer necessary, and you can compile. So that's very handy if you've templated something and then edited the C# code and you just want to run a quick compile on it. So that's very useful as well. Something to note as well is that generally mosaicing used to use a inverse distance weighting way of interpolating. Now it uses a bilinear method, and this is tending to give smoother results in the mosaic. Another big change, it's not such a big change, but it's a change that took a lot of effort, was the, you'll notice that, let's pick a good example, so let's go to Spectral. You'll notice now that the tooltips for any particular processor, or processor method, I should say, any property in a processor method is now a lot more, there's a lot more detail in them across the board generally. So let's have a look. Yeah, the field that provides the values from blah, 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 blah. The field should have numeric values, etc. So yeah, there's a lot more information here, which means that you don't have to go to the help file and constantly pull this aside and look, okay, what does this mean? You can just position your mouse on the input box, and it gives you a tooltip that tells you what it's all about and some of the things that you need to consider. However, if you did want to have a good read of the documentation without necessarily closing down the processor window, you can now right-click here and open the help file in a new window. So where's my window gone? It's over here. So here we go, I've opened that. I was looking at non-numeric records, I right-click open, and it's now popped it up into a new window, so I can read that side by side. I can also do the same from up here, right-click open in the new window, and that allows the help information to pop out, and I can use it separately or alongside the main GUI. Some other small changes have been in the layer controls. So now you'll see in the layer controls, I can access the rendering properties directly rather than having to select, go to display, and then click on this dialog box. And also you'll notice that you can now save a raster out to any of the natively supported raster formats just by right-clicking Save As. And lastly was the addition of the YouTube tutorials. So where probably you're watching this from. So there's a lot more content that covers most of the main topics in RAMP, and they are now all available as to give you an overview as a series of tutorials on YouTube. So that's what's new in the 2021 New Year's Day release of RAMP. Thanks for watching.